In the modern church, we give kids snacks and stickers and half-remembered art projects. I taught Sunday school this last Sunday and asked the kids what they recalled from last week, and not a single memory in a single child, which makes a chapter like this fairly indicting, because in the 16th century, they gave them catechism, and if they survived, they were the elect. Today we're in chapter 7 of Hughes Oliphant Old's The Shaping of the Reformed Baptismal Rite, and the chapter title is Catechetical Instruction, also known as Why You Were Baptized and Why You Now Have to Sit Still and Recite Latin. So we begin in section 1, the Christian humanist's ideal of the restoration of catechetical instruction. Before Luther nailed anything to anything, the Christian humanists were attempting to rehabilitate education, but not for everyone, just for the promising ones. As Old notes, the humanist schools aimed at cultivating an intellectual elite, which is Reformation speak, if you're poor, good luck. Even so, Erasmus tried. His Institutio of 1514 called for catechetical instruction after baptism, which was a bold move in a world where babies were drenched before they could even walk. But Erasmus proposed that, quote, when young people came to sufficient age, they were to be instructed in the fundamentals of the faith and renew their baptismal vows, unquote. He sounds a bit Protestant, but he preceded the Reformation, which is probably why Roman critics accused him of promoting rebaptism, because obviously explaining your own baptism must mean you want a second one. That was the interpretation of Erasmus's efforts from his camp. The next section is the Reformers begin catechetical instruction. So the Reformers came along and they said, yeah, we see your Latin school and we raise you an entire national catechetical apparatus. In 1523, Zwingli began biannual catechism in Zurich, gathering all the youths together publicly. Zwingli, ever the historian, made this observation, quote, from ancient writers I have heard it said, they were asked their names, the creed, the Lord's Prayer, and then anointed with oil, unquote. Old politely calls this theory quite erroneous, which is academic for, well, he tried. But still, Zurich began holding Sunday morning catechetical services, which was a significant departure from medieval practice, where instruction more or less was outsourced to godparents and fate, I guess. Strasbourg, the city of Strasbourg, got on board too. Bucer, Zell, and Capito led regular Kinderbericht, which was probably something like pop quizzes on doctrine for children who didn't know they were in seminary. In Bucer's 1534 catechism, the link between baptism and instruction was clear. Quote, yes, dear Father, for I have been baptized in the name of God, unquote, which was not a memory verse. It's the opening line, really, of a small theological revolution. The next section, the growth of catechetical instruction. This is 1530s to 1541. The 1530s, the golden age of catechisms, which was probably the golden age of anxiety for children in Reformed cities. Luther's shorter catechism standardized the model, which was commandments, creeds, Lord's Prayer, and sacraments. Leo Judd picked it up in Zurich and expanded it with prayers for every occasion. Waking, sleeping, eating, thinking about food, possibly even prayer for more prayers. Judd also, this is a quote, Judd also found that teaching the child to pray was an essential part of catechetical instruction, unquote. Meanwhile, in Strasbourg, Bucer's short scriptural explanation had two catechisms, one for parents and one for kids. Reformers were writing catechisms like it was a badge of honor, and in a way it was. As Old observes, quote, the reestablishment of the catechumenate was a reform that the classic Protestant reformers considered very important, unquote, which could be translated, they actually cared about discipleship and didn't just assume it would happen by some form of osmosis. But it was quite the revolution, really. The next section, catechetical instruction in the Church of Geneva. So then Geneva comes along, Calvin's lab for ecclesiastical order. In the Ecclesiastical Articles of 1537, Calvin proposed reinstating catechism for baptized children, where it was not optional and it was necessary. Quote, children owe to the church a confession of their faith, unquote. Since infants normally can't confess, Calvin saw catechism as a postponed baptismal profession. By 1541, with the ecclesiastical ordinances, Geneva had weekly catechism. Quote, every Sunday at midday, catechism was to be held for children in all of the parish churches, unquote. And here's another quote. When a child was sufficiently instructed, he shall solemnly recite and make a profession of his Christian faith before the church, unquote. But this was no performance, as it could turn into in our era. It was liturgy. This was a fulfillment, vow fulfillment of their faith. Calvin even trained children to sing psalms because Reformed kids don't just memorize doctrine, they chant in metrical stanzas. Psalm 78 naturally made the list. Old notes, quote, Calvin's plan was to train the Church of Geneva to sing by first training the children to sing, unquote. And then came the Genevan Catechism of 1542, which was Calvin's ambitious, overlong, and perhaps slightly rushed towards the end project. It's found at the end of his first volume in the 7-volume set of Calvin's letters. There were 373 questions. Quote, it's not one of Calvin's greatest accomplishments, unquote, is Hughes Oliphant Old's conclusion. And I recorded that to audio not long ago, and I don't think it's so bad. So, it included morning and evening prayers, table blessings, and discipline for daily devotion, a full Christian rhythm, and not just facts to be regurgitated. Eventually, Calvin realized perhaps he'd overshot the average child's attention span and released his shorter catechism in 1553. So, a little over a decade longer, he came to that realization. The actual profession of faith that fulfilled Geneva's liturgical ideal. The conclusion of this chapter, catechetical instruction was one of the most successful Reformed reforms because it stuck and it spread, and then eventually even the Catholics joined in. Quote, the sacrament of baptism as understood by the Reformers entailed a lifelong study of Christian teaching, unquote. This wasn't just for the precocious or pious, or for the elite or for the wealthy. It was part of what it was meant to be a disciple and to learn and to pray, to profess. And if you didn't, well, in Geneva, I guess you'd just say the consistory would want to have a word with you. But it is a sharp contrast from the medieval practice where catechism was not done as it was with the Reformers, which changed it radically. And then, of course, Trent, as a reaction to the Reformation, imposed, this is not in the book here, but Trent goes on to require catechism for children as a response to the Reformation because of the success that the Reformation was having through the catechetical process. So that's chapter 7. Next time, chapter 8 is public profession of faith. So until then, teach your kids well, or if you're doing Sunday school like me, hopefully this is inspiring. Like and subscribe. Rehearse your catechism. This is Reformed Audio. Have a good day.